In this video, I'm going to talk about this. It's step 1 and step 2 question and answer that was held live on Instagram with me. All the answers from the AnKing here. We talked about dedicated study, rotation, shelf exams, basically anything related to these. Just as a preface here, we have these AnKing memberships. This is previously Patreon. What's included in this is essentially that you can email us question and answers. We have multiple medical students. We're all Anki experts. We've been through studying for step 1 and step 2. We've also been through pre-med stuff if that applies to you. You also get some other perks like beta add-ons, early videos, and all of that. So with that, I'm going to share the video here that we had on Instagram.
Hey everybody, I'm gonna wait a second while we get everybody on. I'm not used to this, so I'm still figuring out how Instagram Live works. But I've got lots of questions here on Reddit. Not as many as I thought I would need, and I did set aside like 40 minutes. So if you have questions, feel free to send them in, and we can try and basically just talk about step 1 study topics for the next 20 minutes and what what kind of things you feel like, what questions you have about step 1, about dedicated. I know a lot of people are kind of getting ready to take that right now. So whatever goes along with that. I'm going to pull this up. Okay, so I can see your questions as you send them in. So one of the questions that people were asking is, how do you go about tackling incorrect questions during dedicated or concepts that you're really weak in? Which is like probably the most frequently asked question I have gotten in the last 6 months. So I'm actually going to work on recording a video about that today. Our Patreon members all voted, and that was the one that they by far and away wanted. So that'll be coming out soon. But very quickly, what I normally do is I don't go through my corrects really, as long as I got it correct for the right reason. If I got it right for the wrong reason, then I'd go through it. If it was something where I was like, oh, that was dumb, then I usually just make a quick flashcard out of it just to remind myself not to make that mistake again. If it's something like, the kidney problems, which I don't know why, but I just don't love all of the glomerular, anyway, the kidney stuff. And so when it came to the kidney stuff, I would just go and watch the whole pathoma video, because I realized, hey, I'm weak in this. I'm missing a lot of questions that are all related to this. So I'm just going to go over it again real quick. And then I didn't start every flashcard over or anything like that. I just very briefly went through the cards, looked at where I was like, oh, this is what I need to review. So that's kind of the biggest deal there. Somebody did ask if I'm going to put this video on YouTube. Yes, I am. So if you miss it or parts of it, I'll definitely get it on YouTube for you. Let's see. Another step 1 question I got was, how can I reach my peak? I've matured 90% of the AnKing deck. I'm halfway through UWorld, but I feel like I'm not there yet. Other than finishing UWorld, should I reread all of First Aid, Watchboards and Beyond again, or do you suggest something else? It's a really good question, and something that I get asked quite frequently. Hey, I'm finished with what I should be done. I've done the deck, I've done UWorld, now what? At that point, I think that rereading First Aid or rewatching videos is not going to help you at all, actually, because at that point you're just watching and trying to soak in information. If you've gotten that far already, you need to test your knowledge. You need to do practice questions. So you should, there's a lot of Q banks out there, and nobody's finishing all of them. So Kaplan, Amboss, UWorld, RX, I would just get another Q bank and start working on that. Even to the point where I might even consider suspending your flashcards and just jump head in with practice tests and questions and stuff like that. That's what I would definitely be doing. Let's see. Yeah, I think I answered that question pretty good. I had one question sent in. Someone's asking again, will this be recorded? Yes, it will be recorded. And I will be putting this on the story and on YouTube. So let's see. I downloaded step 1 and step 2 deck, but I want to prep for step 1 only. What should I do? Good question. I get this a lot. So the reason I put the decks together is because step 2 is now the new step 1, right? Step 1's pass fail. And everyone's asking, should I just not do the Anki anymore? Is it not worthwhile? No. The shelf exams are 70 to 90% step 1 knowledge. The only reason I've been able to survive my third year with only doing about 100 cards a day is because my step 1 knowledge was so solid, because I'd been doing Anki for 2 years and I was able to suspend those cards and still work on it. So you definitely should be working on it. A lot of the little things that are in pass fail step 1, biochem stuff, you don't need to necessarily worry about that anymore. But yeah, definitely be really solid. And then you're kind of asking, hey, I'm step one only. Why should I have the step two deck in there? A lot of times during my lectures, I would have, they would teach something like a neurologic disorder or something that it wasn't on step one, but then I later got to my neuro rotation and found out, oh, hey, I learned about this in my second year and I made my own flashcards for it, and now I'm having to restudy it and do the step two flashcards. So the reason I recommend having the step two deck in there is just in case you learn something or there's a card in there that kind of helps clarify something for you, then start doing them. Then you have less flashcards to do during your clinical years. And that's because the clinical years are unreal busy. I mean, you're working 60 hours a week. You're exhausted when you get home. I was at most doing like 20 questions a day, really, and then trying to do 50 to 100 flashcards. So you really don't have a lot of time. You need a strong foundation, or you just can't do well simply because you don't have the time to do well. Someone's asking, how long should a first pass of UWorld take? Truth is, I don't know. If you've seen my video on how I scored over 260 on step one, I talk about how, because of coronavirus, my exam got rescheduled and stuff, and so I lost a few weeks of dedicated. I only finished about 40% of UWorld, and still did well with that. So I don't know how long it should take. I was doing 3 to 4 blocks a day, which is pretty fast. I'm a fast test taker, and I was scoring in the high 80s, 90%, and so I wasn't having to review as much. If you're reviewing more content, then you're not going to be able to do that many questions a day, but I would definitely shoot for about 3 blocks a day, especially in your dedicated as you're getting closer to actually taking the exam. Let's see. This is also a really frequent question I get. How do you keep the bigger picture and make sure I understand the cards rather than answering without thinking? Or in other words, I have 32,000 separate facts. They're all separate from each other. What's more beneficial, doing question banks or Anki religiously if you had to choose from just one? This is a really good question. If I had to pick just one, I would pick just the question banks. And that's because a lot of times, for example, there was this question on multiple practice exams and then one of my shelf exams about a patient who had lupus and she went into surgery and then came out of surgery and was like crazy hypotensive and they couldn't figure out what was wrong with her. And the answer was that the lupus patient was on prednisone. They didn't tell you that, but they were on prednisone, and so that was why, is because they couldn't keep up. They didn't have the steroids that they normally are used to. So that question appeared on multiple practice tests or question banks, and then on the real thing, I saw something similar to it, and it's because I recognized that pattern in the question bank, and you wouldn't necessarily have gotten that pattern from the flashcards. But the flashcards are a really good foundation so that you understand the process and why that's happening, and then you never forget it once you see the question bank. So Anki first, then question banks. If you really only had to pick one, definitely the question banks. So a lot of people will ask us, I only have 6 weeks left and I haven't started the Anki deck. What should I do? I'm like, you should do questions and then use your flashcards for missed questions. Someone's asking, does percentile in UWorld correlate to step one score? Yeah, actually, I think it does pretty well, from what I've seen in my own experience. Let's see. All right. Next question on the list here. What are the famous myths about step one and the process of preparing for it? That's a good question. I don't know if I know even what the myths are really. I think things I've seen is step one's super anatomy heavy or super neuro heavy. And it really just depends on what test you get. You're going to get a different experience, really. So that would be a myth, I would say, is because there really isn't a definite, there's this much stuff on there. Other myths I've seen is people who are like, you need to finish all of the Anki deck. That's not true. Even I went through every flashcard, but I did not do every flashcard. I intentionally tagged them as, I don't want to do this. I don't feel like I'm weak in that subject, or I remember that card. So be selective. You don't necessarily need to do 100% of the deck. Let's see, how good is Sketchy Path? I have never used Sketchy Path other than 1 or 2 videos. I thought it was really poor, so I didn't continue doing it. So I can't really comment there. Recommendations on changing card intervals during class blocks, like 7-week cardio poem versus 3-week heme onc. Good question. I would not recommend changing your intervals at all. The idea is the next time you see your flashcard, you theoretically shouldn't. It's showing you the flashcard before you should forget it. So I would just keep the Anki is really more of a long-term thing. What you want to do is keep the intervals, keep reviewing things, and then as you get close, to that test, you don't like redo your flashcards or anything. You try and synthesize that data. Now that may be practice questions, or that may be getting with a friend and drawing it on a whiteboard. Forrest and I did that for a couple exams. Or just like talking about people, things like that. So that's what I would recommend is that, but otherwise I wouldn't change your intervals. When you get to second year, I would recommend, or sorry, third year, your clinical year, I would recommend changing the intervals and stuff around. And we could talk about that in a little bit. Um, Reviews about sketchy step 2. I've never used sketchy step 2, so I can't comment on that. I have gotten the feeling, so sketchy sold out. They were med students and they sold, they made lots of money, good for them. But I've noticed that sketchy's been a lot more focused on like expanding into the MCAT world and stuff, and seems less focused on the medical world. They haven't updated their videos. They're missing a lot of content like the reproductive drugs and new bugs and stuff that have been identified. So I actually think physio or Pixarize is going to be a lot better for that. And I've been recommending them more and more often. I think that they're more dedicated to the medical student world. They're still run by medical students. So what makes you a fast test taker? I have always been a fast test taker, and I wish I could tell you that there were some skills that I have or something. There really isn't, other than I read quickly. That comes with years and years of reading books and stuff. So one thing I would recommend is always I read the first line just to get a sense of what's going on. Then I read the last question. What's the question? And I briefly just look at the answers like, oh, we're looking at brain stuff here, brain cancers or whatever. Okay, so now I have that in mind as I'm reading the question. That helps speed me up. I know Blake struggles a lot, and one of the other questions on here is advice overcoming testing anxiety. Blake has struggled a lot with timing on tests, and he may actually do a video or something on this in the future. But he will actually like write out like, at this time I need to be on this question, at this time I need to be on this question, and you just need to practice timed tests. If that's you need to work on it like that. The other thing that I've seen work for a lot of people with test anxiety is propranolol. Seems to help a lot of people. If that's you, you take it like right before the test and can kind of slow your heart rate down and stuff. I've seen a lot of people that have had a lot of success with that. I personally don't get test anxiety, so or my test anxiety like almost helps me. It doesn't cripple me. It's not that bad. So I would I would lean towards trying that. Also trying breathing exercises. I know Blake has told me sometimes during his test, even if he's like a little behind and he starts freaking out, you just need to pause. You need to stop and then like take a breather, ground yourself again, and then get going back on the test, and that's going to help you. So that's what I recommend. Next question. We're back. Sorry. Connection died on me. Best deck for pathology for step 1, hands down the deck that I've been updating, the AnKing deck. It has the Zonky deck base, which was based off of Pathoma. Zonky's flashcards are amazing. I wouldn't recommend anything else, honestly. Best resource for ethics, the Amboss card on ethics is so good. Seriously, I read it like the day before my test. Hands down the best resource out there. I also watched a Dirty Medicine video, which was pretty good, although some of it conflicted with the Amboss stuff, and I think the Amboss was a little more up to date, but the Dirty Medicine video was still really good, and I liked their stuff. A lot of straight up physio questions on step 1. I feel like, yeah, reasonable amount. How do I get started with Anki if I haven't yet? I made a whole YouTube channel. That's how this all started. So go to my YouTube channel, watch the videos. I have everything organized in playlists, or if you want it to be even better, we have an online mastery course, the Anki Palace course, which is amazing. Takes you from like step 1 all the way through. On that note as well, for any of you watching, we have our Patreon, or what we've actually merged over to memberships now, and it basically there's 7 of us that are on here. We've all scored really well. We've been using Anki. We understand medical school because we've been in it. We understand pre-med because we've been in it. So if you have questions and you just want to email back and forth forever, like sign up for that. We've really tried to make it pretty cheap. And then there's tutoring, obviously, if you wanted to do tutoring. So that is all available. With the new MBMEs released, what order do you recommend completing them in? I get this question all the time. And the truth is, because they're so new, there's no data saying how well the NBMEs correlate to the actual test like we have with the old NBMEs. So it's really hard to say. After this year, it'll be a lot easier. We are keeping this in mind. Blake still hasn't taken step 1 yet, so he's kind of been studying that. And as soon as I know and have like a feeling, I promise I will share it on Instagram and we'll make that information available. That's a question we get all the time. Let's see. I'm going to go back to Reddit here and see if there's any good questions from step 1. What OS X or iOS programs and apps have you found useful throughout med school, other than Anki, obviously? I'm actually making a video on this really soon. This has been a frequent question as well, so I will touch on that. I have like 10 or 11 that I really love, really cool apps, so that'll be coming out soon. As a first-year medical student, how should I start preparing for USMLE, and what are the best resources to start with? I would actually just recommend going and watching the video how I scored 260 on step 1. I spent almost 10 hours making that video. Literally broke down everything I did for the first 2 years of medical school, trying to make it as helpful as I possibly could for all of you. So I would go there. If you haven't watched that video, even if you're dedicated, I feel like that video is going to be helpful for you. Let's see. Is UWorld enough for the physio part of step 1? I feel like UWorld honestly is pretty comprehensive. AMBOSS is too. And I actually lean more towards AMBOSS. For step 1 and step 2, I felt like it prepared me better. The questions don't match the format of the NBMEs near as well, but they really help you get those more difficult questions that are phrased a little differently than you're used to and stuff. And the AMBOSS also teaches you how to be a good test taker. It teaches you which things you should be highlighting, what you should be thinking after you read the question, and then as you're like looking through the answers. I feel like they do a really good job of that. So if you feel like you're not a fast test taker, or you're still like trying to get used to your test taking skills, AMBOSS is going to be better than UWorld every time. Let's see. I'm new to Anki, AnKing, and stuff. Do I need to make my own deck for step 1 and step 2, or is AnKing enough? The AnKing deck, honestly, I've tried to make it as comprehensive as possible. You'll probably miss a few things here and there. Things get updated. I try to keep it as up to date as possible. There's over 100 people working on the deck with me right now, which is awesome. We have a huge Slack group chat. We have lots of projects we're working on. So I would recommend that as your base. And then if you need to make extra flashcards, but learn how to use Anki well. The better you understand how to use Anki, the better you will perform. It's a tool, but it needs to be used correctly. Let's see, is it realistic to go through 10,000 AnKing cards over 4 weeks? Probably not. That sounds awful, honestly. So I wouldn't recommend it. I would focus on the things that are most important or hard for you. Let's see. If someone was using Anki on and off during first year, would you recommend making a new profile? I can't see the end of this question. I typically recommend people just keep everything in the same profile as long as you understand what you're doing. It's not too messy. It makes it easier for syncing with your phone as well if you're doing that. So that's probably what I would recommend. Let's see. Best resource for step 2 CK. I have used Anki and AMBOSS exclusively, except for like 1 or 2 rotations. I threw some UWorld questions in there, and I've done pretty well on everything. I am taking step 2 in about 6 weeks. I will make a great video on everything I have done. I'll also, over the next few weeks, try and make some Instagram stories that talk about what I'm doing, all of that. I actually suspended a lot of my Anki flashcards yesterday. It was amazing. I have 20 flashcards to do today. So yes, you can all be jealous because I know you're all in the 600 flashcard time period for step 1 right now. Someone's asking when Blake is taking step 1. I think he's planning in a couple months here. So, and he can definitely do a question and a Q&A thing when that happens. I'm sure he'd be happy to. We really try. I know this is like the stressful time period for everybody. I've been through it myself. I got high blood pressure because of it. So I understand. And we really, really are trying to help as much as possible. I know there's a lot of influencers out there. I'm not trying to be an influencer. My content is really just focused on how can I help you and give you the best resources possible. Do I make summaries of subjects before Anki, or do I just learn from the book and then Anki? Good question. Sometimes I would, sometimes I wouldn't. So like if I was memorizing pathways and stuff, that was really difficult, or algorithms, I would draw that out usually and then like copy or screenshot that into my flashcards to help me remember it. If it was just like cold memorizing a pathoma video and the names of different disorders and stuff, then no, I wouldn't. I usually would just do the flashcards. But I know a lot of people really like using the pathoma book to kind of follow through with the videos, and that's fine too. I just had pathoma open on one screen, and then on my other screen I had my Anki deck open, and I was going through the flashcards and adding details or thoughts as I was watching the video, and that was usually the most helpful thing for me. So that's probably what I would recommend, but try and find what works from you. Did I benefit from doing the RX question bank? Yeah, I honestly I did. It's simpler, but it helps you just kind of like get the information and just synthesize it. Just make sure you understand things the first go around. But I would definitely not use it as your only one. If you're only doing two, I would recommend Amboss and UWorld. I wouldn't do RX. Let's see. Lots of people saying thank you. I appreciate that. You guys are all so nice. I really appreciate that. That's what makes me want to keep doing this, even though I'm so busy all the time. Let's see. Best decks for dedicated period before step one. So if you haven't been doing any decks, I would just recommend doing questions, and then you could grab a deck or make your own flashcards. I think that making your own flashcards actually helps. It helps you synthesize the information better, but if you're just trying to hurry or get through more content, then using the pre-made decks, even if you haven't done them before, just as using them for your missed questions, that's still going to be really helpful. Let's see, can you explain how you chose what to suspend during dedicated? Not sure about, but it stresses me to suspend anything. Yeah, it does. No, I understand. In fact, when I did it, I was like the first one to do it. Everybody was like, no, you got to keep your flashcards going. And so I was kind of an experiment, and now it sounds like everyone's kind of taking my advice. Do realize that I'm just one person, so my advice is not like the ultimate advice. But I went through, I took almost an hour going through things. I went through all the pathoma tags, and I was like, okay, kidneys I feel weak on. And so I added a to keep tag to the kidneys. Then I went through, biochem and stuff, and I was like, I want to keep the biochems I feel really weak on it. So I added a to keep tag to that. And then same thing with micro and farm. And I added this to keep tag to all the things where I was like, I need to keep this. Then I used the search algorithms, and I set up so everything that was unsuspended that did not have a to keep tag, I suspended. And that's kind of how I did it. Like I said, it took me an hour. So sit down and do it. Let's see, someone just said they reached their goal on step one and videos helped a ton. Oh, I'm so glad. I love hearing all of your success stories. Seriously. It just makes all of this worth it because I do put a lot of time into this and I don't always hear, how effective it really is. So with that, I kind of want to move on to the step two stuff for a couple of minutes later than what I was planning on. So, someone says, I'm ignoring you. I didn't mean to ignore you. I'm sorry. Send your question again. So I'm going to move on to the step two stuff, and we'll kind of talk about that. Let's see what questions we've got here. Is Boards and Beyond still worth it? And Boards and Beyond step two, good question. I actually have it. I haven't used it. I know a lot of people also use online MedEd. I haven't used that either. So, yeah, I know a lot of people do. And if that works for you, great. I just did the flashcards, and that worked for me. I would do the flashcards, and then I would do practice questions every day. So one of the highest question on Reddit here was, any advice for people taking the family medicine shelf? A lot of my peers have told me they barely pass the shelf, and there doesn't seem to be a gold standard resource. This kind of ties into everything. So there really isn't a gold standard resource for anything other than surgery, which is the DiVirgilio textbook. And that's what makes it really difficult. The thing I loved about Anki is that the cards are not as good as Anki cards. The Dorian cards aren't as good, but the information is there. And so what I did before the rotation, I tried a week or two before the rotation. So sometimes I was on another rotation. I would go through, and my goal was usually to go through like 50 flashcards a day. But I wasn't actually adding 50 flashcards. My goal was to go through 50 flashcards. So I would go through them, and I would say, I want this, I don't want this, I want this, I want this, I don't want this, I don't want this. And I'd go through all those flashcards, and I usually only ended up doing about 50%. I feel like I suspended a lot, and that's because so much of it relies on step one knowledge. So that's what I would recommend doing, is get those flashcards kind of done before the rotation. Then you can just be doing the reviews of the flashcards and really working on practice questions. And then I made a goal. I was not very good at this early on in my rotations, but later on, I made a goal that I was going to make at least one flashcard for every question that I missed, unless it was like truly an accident. And when I started doing that, I really started improving on my shelf exams. And I think it was just because I was forcing myself to remember those. And I always add a missed questions tag to those cards. And then I would add a missed questions filtered deck so that I knew I needed to spend extra time on that stuff. That's what I did. Someone's asking, did I do 2 passes on Amboss for step 2? No. In fact, I didn't even get through 1. I usually just did the 2 through 4 hammers. I would start with the 1 hammers in there, and then once I felt like I was getting all of the 1 hammers right all of the time, I would just do the 2 through 4 hammers. I never did 5 hammers for any rotation, and I feel like that was a good decision. I stand behind that. So that's what I would recommend for people. Let's see. Do I feel like NBMEs underpredict? No, I feel like they predict pretty well. And I can't really speak to the step 2 one. I don't have a step 2 score yet, and I haven't taken the NBMEs, but for step 1 at least. Someone's asking study strategies for self-assessments leading up to step 2 CK. Let me pull that up, actually. I just made my plan. I talked with our academic office here. So I am starting a rotation. I have 4 weeks of a derm rotation coming up. And actually the Amboss Step 2 self-assessment is next week, so I'm going to do that. That's going to be my baseline. It's their first time doing this, but I have really trusted Amboss. They've done an awesome job, and I strongly recommend them. So I'm going to use that as my baseline. And then I have about 2.5 weeks of dedicated. So my first week, I might do NBME 6. I might just leave it. That was kind of a discussion we had. I'm going to do UWorld 1, kind of the end of that first week. Then I'll do NBME 8. And then my last week, I'll do UWorld 2 and the free 120 and take my test. That's kind of my plan there. Has anyone you know tried Sketchy for step 2? I do know people, and some people have said it, but what I've heard is that they're very long videos. It's kind of hard to cram all of that information in. But if that really is the only way you can learn, then it may be useful. I believe Physio is coming out with step 2 content soon. Be interesting to see what happens with that. I have been very impressed with Physio's content. Worked closely with them. I have a discount code if you're interested in Physio. Is there any way to revert cards to the decks you originally placed them in the AnKing deck? Unfortunately, no, but you can use tags to kind of manually move them back. Is kind of the best method we've done. Let's see. How are you able to find time to study so well when rotations feel so busy and tiring in 3rd year? This is a great question. So what I did on every rotation, really, except for surgery and then maybe OB-GYN on parts of it, is I just woke up at 5 every morning. Didn't matter what rotation I was on. And I would do my practice questions first thing. And I usually do about 20, which would take me a half hour or so. And I usually didn't get time to review them, but I would get my practice questions done. Then I, a lot of times, have to take the bus to where I'm going. So if I take the bus, I would do my flash Anki cards on the bus. If not, I would just kind of do them throughout the day, whenever you're like, have to go to the bathroom, and you just do 20 cards real quick. Or during lunch was usually how I'd get the flashcards done, and then I'd come home, review, the 2 or 3 questions that I missed, kind of get that deal, and then be done. And being able to just come home and be done was really nice. And then I'd try and go to bed by 9 every night, and then wake up early every morning. That was really helpful. And then sometimes I just had to use Saturdays to take practice tests, was kind of how it worked. But it is exhausting. It's not easy, but if you just do 15, 20 questions a day, you're going to be okay. Let's see. How is Princess AnKing? Oh, guys, she is so cute. She's adorable, and she's laughing now and smiling all the time. It's so fun. She's adorable. She's actually with my wife in Colorado right now, so I don't get to see her, but she is adorable. All right, next question here. I guess kind of back to that family medicine question. There's not really a gold standard resource. I would recommend the UTPSF or whatever guidelines. I can't remember the acronym. Those were really good. And there is a flashcard tag for that. But those are really, really helpful to use for the family practice shelf. Let's see. What do you see as the future of step 2 now that the focus has shifted from step 1? Do you anticipate some of the gold standard resources will be uncovered or developed, like step 1 or the broadness of step 2 content, et cetera, et cetera? I cannot overemphasize your step 1 foundation is everything for your step 2 and your stuff. So those resources are still going to be gold standard, and then the question banks are going to be the best thing. But like I said, I believe Physio is making stuff. Boards and Beyond has made step 2. We know Sketchy is. So I feel like everyone is kind of expanding into that space. They know that this is important. Online MedEd has as well. So that's all important. Um, Let's see. Someone's asking, can you make a how-to M3-year video like the step 1? Yeah, I actually will. I'm planning on doing that in the next few weeks here. It's just kind of like how I used Anki, how I went through every rotation. There's a playlist of what I've done specifically on every rotation, including like how you honor and get good evaluations and stuff. But I'll make one more specific for the shelf exams and Anki and how I'm using all of those. So yeah. Someone's asking, is derm still my target field? Yes, I am still planning on applying to dermatology, applied to a few away rotations. If any of you are applying derm, it'd be kind of fun to see all of you on the interview trail. Or maybe even if you're not applying derm and you just want to say hey and grab some lunch if interviews actually happen. We'll see what happens with COVID. Step 2. It's been harder for me to use the step 2 cards because of how they are formatted. A lot of algorithms, case presentations, so I can't jump straight into the cards like a lot of people. This really is hard. I know what you mean. That is difficult, and I just kind of brute forced the flashcards and tried to memorize things, and I did find a lot of times you memorize things you didn't understand, and that's why the questions are so important, and that's why I made my own flashcards for every missed question. I didn't ever restart flashcards because I wanted my own that were formatted well, stuff like that. So that's kind of what I'd recommend. Someone's asking what happened to glutamate. I don't know. I've been talking to him, and he's busy is what he said. I don't know what's going to happen because he said he was going to get stuff out a couple months ago, and I haven't seen it. So hopefully he's okay. I think he's had some family stuff going on from what I understand. So yeah. Are there a lot of difficult questions in the step 2 exam? I don't know. The shelf exams are hard. They're not easy. But I have heard step 2 is a little bit easier than the shelf exams. I'm starting on Monday. Doing step 2 practice questions. But if you look at UWorld, I'm pretty sure the UWorld shelf questions are just step 2 questions, and they just like try and fit it in a box. And I think that's why Amboss actually is better for the shelf exams from what I've heard, and UWorld is a lot more focused on step 2. So we'll see how that goes. But I have felt like step 1 was harder initially. Step 2 has been a little bit easier in the sense that you're seeing things in clinic. Sorry, reconnected there. You see a lot of things in clinic and stuff, so it just kind of like really reinforces things. Like I did a pulmonology rotation, so understanding what you do for effusions and testing with that and COPD exacerbations and stuff was really easy because I had managed a bunch of patients like that. So easier in that sense. And a lot of people I've heard talk to is saying that it is easier. Step 2, what did you use to learn the material prior to for doing cards for each rotation? I didn't. And I think that's just because I had a good foundation from step 1. And a lot of this just builds on it. I know that's weird, but when you get going, you'll find a lot of it just builds. Like maybe you have to memorize 1 or 2 things, but you're just understanding an algorithm. Like what do you do to treat COPD exacerbations if they're like this or if they're like this or whatever, and you just kind of memorize it based off the knowledge that you have. So yeah. How do you know what to pull from each question to make comprehensive flashcards when you're making questions or flashcards off of wrong questions? I'm making a video on this today. How to review missed questions, how I make flashcards, that kind of stuff. I'm making a video on it. So hopefully that'll be out soon. It'll be on our Patreon or memberships first, and then I'll release it live. So yeah, coming soon. IM rotation is a lot. How can I filter the deck based on, for example, endocrinology? I did it by OME first, but there's at least 2,000 plus more altogether not tagged by Online MedEd. We are working on Online MedEd tags. The next update will have more Online MedEd tags. Actually trying to work with Online MedEd. Future agreement there. We'll see. I've been talking with their CEO. They're great. I don't know how to filter them, honestly. I just slammed through all of them in not a great order. That is my goal kind of now that I have a little more free time, is to update the deck so that the step 2 deck's a little more organized, a little more in order so that you can learn things better. That is definitely a downside of the step 2 deck I recognize. And I wish I had a good answer for that immediately. Unfortunately, I don't. Obstetrics has almost no overlap with step 1. How'd you deal with that? It's true. I had the benefit of being male, which meant that a lot of people would not let me come and watch their childbirth, so I got a lot of study time. I did the UWise question bank along with all of Amboss, and I felt like that was really good. The Anki flashcards were also really on point for that shelf exam. That was my highest shelf exam, was OB. So the flashcards, and then do UIs and amboss. Let's see, related cards, even mature ones, are showing up even though I've checked the option very related new cards. I don't know what your problem is without looking through it individually. Sorry. You can sign up for a membership. We can look through it individually if you want, or it might be that your sub decks and your head deck have different settings. Let's get some more questions. Boards and Beyond question make that comes with the subscription seems good. Heard any reviews? I've heard that it's a little too. You don't get the second and third order questions. You get more first order. So it's great, like first initial review, but not gonna be the best ultimate thing. That's what I've heard. What are your thoughts on Boards and Beyond for step 2? Kind of touched on that before. Blake really liked it. He said it was good. So I can't comment on it because I haven't used it. Sorry. I know everyone wants to know about resources, and I just didn't use any. I used Anki because it works so well. Would you recommend continuing step 1 flashcards after you are done to maintain a strong foundation for step 2? Yes and no. So I suspended pretty much everything except those that had a step 2 overlap. And looking back, that was helpful, but mostly what was helpful was the farm and micro stuff. The farm and micro is going to come back to bite you, especially on like family med and peds. Peds had so much micro, a lot of infectious disease stuff. So I would keep those for the most part, but otherwise, no. You want to limit your card count. You're going to be so busy, and you're going to be trying to do new flashcards. So you just kind of rely on that foundation that you had previously. So yeah. Let me look and see if there's any other questions on Reddit that I didn't answer that were submitted. I don't think so. Oh, let's see. Most optimal way to study while balancing rotations and extracurriculars. Good question. I just didn't do extracurriculars. It sounds so hard, but it is so hard to do stuff during your third year. I would do research, but it would be on the weekends. And it was minimal. If you're listening to this and you are early on in your medical school career and you want to go to a competitive residency, you should do research your first and second year, because doing it during your third year is madness. It's very difficult. You're not going to be able to do a lot. That would be my honest recommendation. So let's see. Somebody is saying, I don't know how to use Anki, or how do I use Anki a couple times. Check out our YouTube channel, look at the playlist, or check out our Anki Mastery course. That's the best place to start for using Anki, hands down. I think I got all of the questions there on Reddit, so I'll just open it up. We can just do, for another 5 minutes or so, any step 1, step 2 questions that you have kind of left over, and we can kind of wrap up here. Do you know about old graduates? How do they improve their chances to match? I don't, unfortunately. I'm really sorry. I've been trying to kind of research that and understand a little better, but I don't. Other than, doing research it seems to be a big thing, and then extracurriculars, getting yourself involved. Did I do all the biochem cards in Anki? They say it's Anki. It's too minute heavy. Yeah, true. I did suspend a decent amount, but I did a lot of them. I was worried, and I really wanted to score high. If you're not wanting to score like 260s above, then you're probably okay to suspend a decent amount. If you're taking it pass fail, then yeah, you're definitely good. How long did it take to finish UWorld? I did not finish UWorld. So I don't know. I would just count how many blocks you can do a day and do the math from there. How do you study new information that you see on Anki? Do you just memorize it? Yes, for my clinical years, yes, but that's because I have such a good foundation. My first year, I would always use some sort of video or something to back it up and really try and understand it. A couple times there wasn't a video, and I would go through the flashcards and try and understand it from the flashcards, which was usually okay, but if I didn't, I would just Google it and just Wikipedia it just so that I could understand what was going on. Yeah. How many questions do you do per day? So I did, during my my second year, I did 20 a day. During dedicated, I was doing 3 or 4 blocks a day. And now during my third year, I was usually doing about 20 questions a day. And I usually took the weekends off if I could, if I wasn't working. What is the schedule of people taking their exam in the last 10 to 12 weeks for step 1? Check out my video on how I scored over 260 on step 1. That video kind of talks about my schedule and what I'd recommend and stuff. Yeah. Best step 2 deck. Truthfully, I want to say it's the AnKing deck, but it's hard to say because it's not the best deck, honestly. It is pretty good in that it's more updated than other resources, and it's a little more organized, but nothing is organized really. I've heard the doc deck works for a lot of people. making your own flashcards. It's really hard to say. I've used the AnKing one. I've done pretty well. So that's n=1 at least. What would be the level of discipline and dedicated the last few weeks for step one? That is a grind, but you have to do it. Oh man, I keep reconnecting. Sorry. I was doing like 4 blocks a day and just slamming through things, and that really is what you have to do. You have to be that dedicated. I take the weekends off and play hard. Forget about med school stuff and play hard, because that relaxing time is going to be really important to you. How did you review your questions? I'm making a video on this today. Everyone keeps asking this, so I'm making a video. We'll talk about it then. First year med student, how would you recommend Anki now? I would recommend going and watch, even though you're not that close to step one, watch my video on how I scored 260, over 260 on step one, because it talks about what I did during my first year. But you just want to slam through things. You want to get lots of flashcards done. You want to understand things. Use the question banks by like topic just to reinforce things. As like once you finish your cardio block, then do the cardio questions. But don't worry about doing the cumulative stuff until you get to your second year. Yeah. What is your gamer tag? It's Saint Nick. Is my gamer tag. Let's see. How many passes of UWorld do you recommend for step one? Just one. Do one pass and then find a new question bank. That's what I've been recommending to everybody. I get good feedback on that. What is my name? I'm Nick. A lot of the other team members, you actually can go on our website. We have a little bio on all the members of the team. I do a little more of the face, but they are people working behind the scenes doing a lot of things for you. Maximum number of cards per day that I'd recommend. I would try not to go over 800. Once you get past that, you're kind of exhausted, is what seems. Definitely not over 1,000. All right. Looks like that's kind of most of the questions and time's up here. Hopefully that was helpful. I'm sorry if I didn't get to your question. You can sign up for one of our memberships. We answer the emails every day. You get other perks too, like early videos and some beta add-ons and stuff like that. I just put a beta add-on up today, which is kind of exciting. I'm going to put this up on the story. I'll also put this up on YouTube so that you can go rewatch it if you want. And last question, are you still doing Anki daily? Yes, I'm not ruining my streak. I'm doing Chinese cards and then my own cards for missed questions. So anyway, thank you everybody for your support. Seriously, we all really appreciate it. It makes us really happy to hear all of your successes and how happy you guys have all been. Thanks for learning with the AnKing. Be sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel here, as well as follow us on Facebook, Instagram, or Patreon. That is at AnKingMed. Also, feel free to reach out via email or check out our website, ankingmed.com, for more tips and tricks.